The smell of a hospital is distinct. It's a mix of antiseptic, floor wax, and fear. But that night, all I could smell was my mother's expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5, masking the scent of her own desperation. I was standing in the VIP waiting area of St. Jude's Medical Center. My back was pressed against the cold beige wall, and my mother, Eleanor, was less than an inch from my face. Her eyes, usually a composed icy blue, were wide and manic. Her manicured nails were digging into my upper arm, sharp enough to draw blood through my silk blouse. "You are going to sign those papers, Joyce," she hissed, her voice low but trembling with a rage I had rarely seen directed so openly. "Tiffany is dying in there, dying, and you are standing here worrying about—" "What? A scar? A few weeks of recovery?" My father, Richard, stood behind her. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He was pacing, wringing his hands, looking at the floor tiles as if the answers to his financial prayers were written in the grout. "Mom, it's not just a scar," I said, my voice shaking. I tried to pull my arm away, but her grip tightened. "It's a major surgery. The doctor said the risks." "I don't care what the doctor said," Eleanor screamed, finally losing the facade of the grieving mother. Heads turned in the hallway. A nurse at the station looked up, alarmed, but Eleanor didn't care. "She is your sister, your little sister. We raised you to be family. We put a roof over your head, clothes on your back. And now, when we finally ask for one thing in return, one thing?" She called, asking for an organ, one thing. "I'm not hesitating because I don't love her," I pleaded, feeling that familiar, suffocating weight of guilt they had installed in me since childhood. "But Dr. Evans said this is an emergency procedure. There hasn't been a psychological evaluation. There hasn't been a full compatibility panel. It feels rushed." "It's rushed because she has hours, Joyce. Hours." Eleanor released my arm and shoved me backward. I stumbled. "If she dies, it is on you. Do you hear me? You will be the murderer." I looked at my father. "Dad, you can't think this is okay. Just forcing me into surgery without a second opinion?" Richard finally looked up. His face was gray, aged 10 years in a day. But it wasn't grief I saw there. It was panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. "Joyce, honey," he said, his voice wheedling, "please, just do what your mother says. We can't lose Tiffany. We can't afford to lose her." That was a strange choice of words. We can't afford to lose her. At that moment, the double doors swung open. Dr. Evans walked out. He was the family doctor my parents had insisted we use for years, despite him practicing out of a strip mall clinic rather than a major hospital. But here he was, having admitting privileges at St. Jude's, looking sweaty and nervous. "Mrs. Sterling," Dr. Evans said, wiping his forehead, "Tiffany's levels are critical. The ammonia in her blood is spiking. If we don't get that liver transplant started within the next 6 hours, she's going into a coma she won't wake up from." Eleanor whirled on me. See what you're doing?" "But why me?" I asked, tears finally spilling over. "Why am I the only option? Put her on the list. I'll pay for the best specialists." "There is no list for her," Eleanor shouted. "Not with her history. You are the only match. You are the only one who can save her." She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "Listen to me, Joyce. We didn't bring you into this house to be selfish. We brought you here to be useful. You are her sister. You are her insurance policy. Now act like it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Insurance policy. Not daughter. Not child. Insurance policy. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. I looked at this woman, the woman I had spent 32 years trying to please, trying to make proud with my grades, my career as a forensic accountant, my constant financial bailouts of their bad investments, and I realized she didn't see me. She saw a spare parts bin for her golden child. I I choked on the words. I need air. You need to sign the consent form, Eleanor screeched, thrusting a clipboard at my chest. I pushed the clipboard away. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet hospital wing. I said I need air. I turned and ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I hit the stairwell door and took the steps 2 at a time, my heels clicking frantically on the concrete. I could hear my mother screaming my name from the hallway, a sound that mixed fury with something else, fear. But not fear for Tiffany. It sounded like the fear of someone whose house of cards was about to collapse. I burst out into the cool night air of the parking lot. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get my car keys out of my purse. I leaned against the cold metal of my sedan and gasped for breath. My arm throbbed where her nails had dug in. I was 32 years old. I was a senior auditor at a top firm. I hunted down corporate fraud for a living. I was strong. But in front of them, I was 6 years old again, apologizing for existing. Insurance policy. The words replayed in my head. Why would a mother say that? Even in grief? Even in anger? Insurance policy implies a transaction. It implies that my purpose was predetermined. I looked up at the hospital windows. Somewhere up there, my sister Tiffany was dying. And despite everything, despite her bullying, her entitlement, her cruelty, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being selfish? Was I letting my sister die? But then I remembered the look in my father's eyes. We can't afford to lose her. Something wasn't adding up. My forensic accountant brain, usually reserved for scanning spreadsheets for embezzled funds, suddenly clicked into gear. The urgency, the specific doctor, the bypass of standard transplant protocols, the sheer terror on my parents' faces that didn't look like grief. I wasn't just a daughter being asked to make a sacrifice. I was a mark in a con game. I just didn't know the rules yet. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and unlocked my car. I wasn't going to run away, but I wasn't going back into that room to sign my life away either. Not until I knew exactly what I was signing for. To understand why that night in the hospital was so shattering, you have to understand the dynamic of the Sterling household. In our house, there were 2 distinct castes. There was Tiffany, the golden child, and there was me, the provider. Tiffany was 4 years younger than me. She was blonde, petite, and bubbly, everything my mother, Elamar, wanted in a daughter. I was brunette, tall, awkward, and serious. From the moment Tiffany was born, the sun revolved around her. My parents didn't just love her, they worshipped her. I was the responsible one. That's the code word parents use when they want to turn a child into a third parent. By the time I was 12, I was doing the family taxes because my father, Richard, wasn't good with numbers. By 16, I was working 2 jobs to save for a college fund that my parents eventually drained to pay for Tiffany's modeling classes. Classes she quit after 2 weeks because the instructor told her she needed to be on time. Joyce doesn't mind, my mother would say, not even looking at me. Joyce is capable. Tiffany is delicate. She needs support. That word delicate was the shield they used to protect Tiffany from the consequences of every bad decision she ever made. When Tiffany failed out of college, it was the professor's fault. When she got fired from 3 internships, it was because the bosses were jealous of her beauty. And when she started drinking, heavily, it was because she was too sensitive for this cruel world. I, on the other hand, was the ATM, the safety net. I graduated top of my class, got my CPA, and landed a high-paying job at a firm in the city. I thought, naively, that my success would finally earn their respect. Instead, it just made them feel entitled to my salary. "Joyce, the mortgage is due and your father's bonus hasn't come in," Eleanor would call me, her voice sweet as syrup. Or, Joyce, Tiffany needs a new car. Her old one is unsafe. You don't want your sister driving a death trap, do you? I paid. I always paid. I paid off their credit cards. I paid for Tiffany's rehab stints, the ones she never took seriously. I paid because I thought I was buying love. I thought every check I wrote was a down payment on finally being seen as their daughter. But let's talk about Tiffany's illness. 6 months ago, Tiffany crashed her car into a tree. She was drunk, twice the legal limit. It wasn't the first time, but it was the worst. She walked away with scratches, but the medical scan revealed something else. Her liver was shot. Not just damaged, destroying itself. Dr. Evans, the family doctor, sat us down. It's a rare genetic condition, he had said, avoiding my eyes. Aggravated by alcohol, yes, but primarily genetic. Poor luck. I remember frowning. Genetic? But I don't have it, and Mom and Dad don't have it. It skips generations, Evans had said quickly. And Joyce, you seem to have the robust constitution of a workhorse. Tiffany is fragile. There it was again. Fragile. Since that diagnosis, the house had been a shrine to Tiffany's suffering. She lay on the Chase lounge all day, drinking special teas, which I strongly suspected were laced with vodka, while Mom waited on her hand and foot. I was the villain because I asked questions. Shouldn't she stop drinking entirely? I asked during Sunday dinner. Don't shame your sister, Dad snapped, slamming his fork down. She's in pain, Joyce. A little wine helps the pain. A little wine. For a failing liver. It was insanity. But it was their insanity, and I was just the outsider looking in. Leading up to the hospital ultimatum, the requests for money had escalated. Dad needed $20,000 for legal fees related to the accident. Mom needed $10,000 for holistic treatments. I transferred the money, watching my own savings for a down payment on a house dwindle. I felt like I was drowning, but every time I tried to set a boundary, Mom would pull the guilt card. After all we sacrificed for you, we took you in when we were struggling. She always trailed off there. Took you in. It was a weird phrase for biological parents to use, but I assumed they meant they kept me during hard financial times. The night of the ultimatum, everything came to a head. Tiffany had collapsed at a party, not a support group meeting, a party. She was rushed to St. Jude's. And now, standing in the parking lot, the pieces started to click together in a terrifying pattern. Dr. Evans saying it was genetic meant Tiffany couldn't be blamed for her condition. It cleared her of the alcoholic stigma for the transplant list, except she wasn't on the list. Why? Because if the hospital ran their own tests, they'd see the alcohol abuse. They'd deny her. So they needed a private donor, a directed donation. Me. They needed to bypass the hospital's ethics committee. That's why Eleanor was screaming. That's why there was no psych eval. They were trying to bully me into surgery before the hospital realized what was really going on. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Mom. If you leave, don't bother coming back. You are dead to us. I stared at the screen. The screen blurred as tears welled up again. But this time, the tears weren't hot with shame. They were cold. They were the tears of someone mourning a death that had already happened. I wasn't the daughter. I was the harvest. I got into my car and locked the doors. I wasn't going to go back inside, but I wasn't going home to cry either. I wiped my face, put the car in gear, and drove. Not away from the problem, but toward the truth. I needed to know why my father said they couldn't afford to lose her. Because in my world, money always leaves a trail, and I was the best tracker in the business. I drove around for an hour, aimlessly, just letting the city lights blur past my windshield. My phone kept buzzing. Calls from Dad, text from Mom, even a slurred voicemail from Tiffany telling me I was a jealous bitch. I finally turn the phone off. But guilt is a powerful drug. Around 2 a.m., the silence in my car became deafening. What if I was wrong? What if Dr. Evans was right and it really was genetic? What if I let my sister die because I was paranoid? I turned the car around. I would go back. I wouldn't sign immediately, but I would talk to them. I would try to find a middle ground. Maybe we could get a second opinion together. I parked in the hospital garage and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet now, the chaotic energy of the emergency earlier replaced by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes. I approached Tiffany's room 402. The door was slightly ajar. I raised my hand to knock, to offer a truce, when I heard my father's voice. It wasn't the panicked, wheedling voice from earlier. It was angry. "She's gone, Eleanor. She actually left. What if she doesn't come back?" I froze. I pressed myself against the wall, just out of sight. "She'll come back," my mother's voice replied. It was cold, sharp, devoid of any tears. "She always comes back. She's desperate for our approval. It's pathetic, really." My stomach turned. I held my breath. "But the timeline, Elle," Dad hissed. "The lawyers are pressing. If Tiffany dies, the trust dissolves. It goes to the secondary beneficiary. We lose everything. The house, the cars, the debt. We'll be on the street. The trust." My heart hammered against my ribs. What trust? We were always struggling. I paid their mortgage. If there was a trust fund, why was I paying their bills? "She won't die," Eleanor snapped. "We just need that liver. Once Joyce signs, we're in the clear. Evans has the paperwork ready. He'll backdate the psychological consent." "Evans is costing us a fortune," Dad grumbled. "That bribe money came out of the last of the equity." "It's an investment, Richard," Eleanor's voice raised slightly, then dropped to a whisper. "Look, once the transplant is done, Tiffany stabilizes, we keep access to the monthly stipend, and Joyce recovers and goes back to work. She keeps paying the extras. Nothing changes." "And if Joyce has complications?" Dad asked. "Evans said her liver is slightly smaller than average. Taking 60% might, Then she has complications," Eleanor said, her tone as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "Honestly, Richard, she's served her purpose. The money comes through Tiffany. Joyce is just labor. If she gets sick, she has her own insurance. We don't foot that bill." Snap. That was the sound of the last thread connecting me to these people breaking. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a quiet, internal fracture. The grief evaporated. The guilt vanished. The longing for a mother's love, gone. Burned away in a flash of cold, hard clarity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now, perfectly steady. I turned it on, navigated to the voice memo app, and hit record. "Just make sure Tiffany keeps her mouth shut," Dad said. "She was babbling about the real sister earlier when she was high on meds." "She knows better," Eleanor scoffed. "She knows who writes her checks. Just get Joyce back here. Tell her I fainted. Tell her I'm having a heart attack. Play on her sympathy. That's her weak spot." "Okay, I'll call her again." I stopped recording. I saved the file as the truth. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't scream. That's what the old Joyce would have done, cried and asked why. The new Joyce? The Joyce who had just realized she was nothing more than an organ farm for her parents' lifestyle? She was a strategist. I needed evidence. A recording was good, but in a court of law, they could claim they were under duress or that I took it out of context. I needed hard receipts. I needed to know about this trust. I needed to know why Tiffany was the key to the money, and I needed to know what real sister meant. I backed away from the door, silent as a ghost. I walked back down the hallway, past the nurse's station, and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. My face was pale, my eyes dark. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like an auditor who had just found a discrepancy in the books that was going to bring the whole company down. I wasn't going to give them my liver. I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. "Marcus," I said when the voice answered. "It's Joyce. I know it's 2 a.m. I need a forensic sweep on my parents' finances. And I need you to find out everything you can about a trust fund attached to the name Sterling. Oh, and Marcus, I'm going to need a lawyer, a shark." Marcus met me at an all-night diner 3 blocks from the hospital. He was an old flame from college who had turned into a cynical but brilliant private investigator. He looked at me over his black coffee, his eyes scanning the bruises on my arm where Eleanor had grabbed me. "You look like hell, Joyce," he said gently. "I feel like I just woke up from a 30-year coma," I replied, sliding into the booth. I played him the recording. Marcus listened, his jaw tightening with every second. When it finished, he let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Joyce, that's cold. Even for rich people problems, that's cold." "We're not rich, Marcus. That's the thing. I pay their mortgage." "Apparently someone is rich," Marcus tapped the table. "If there's a trust that dissolves when Tiffany dies, it means the trust is tied to her life. Usually, that implies she's the beneficiary of a specific bequest." "But why not me?" I asked, the question gnawing at me. "I'm the oldest. I'm the responsible one." "Unless," Marcus hesitated. "Look, I need to dig, but you need to protect yourself physically. If they are willing to use a shady doctor to cut you open, they are desperate." "I need to know if I'm even a match," I said. "Dr. Evans said I was, but he's lying about the genetics. He could be lying about the match just to get me on the table." "You need an independent test," Marcus said. "I know a doctor, Dr. Sarah Chen. She hates Evans. She runs the lab at Mercy General across town. I can get you in now." We left the diner. The night felt surreal, like a noir movie. I was moving through the shadows of my own life. Dr. Chen was a stern woman with kind eyes. She met us at the back entrance of her lab. I explained everything, the pressure, the lack of protocol, the suspicions. She took my blood samples and swabbed my cheek without a word. "I'll run a full HLA panel and a cross-match," she said. "And Joyce, I'll run a DNA test too, just to be thorough." "Why?" I asked. She looked at me, a strange expression on her face. "Because if your sister has a genetic condition that you don't have, and your parents are acting this strangely about inheritance, we need to rule out variables. I'll rush it. 24 hours. I went back to my apartment, but I didn't sleep. I started pulling old boxes from my closet. Tax returns, medical records, old photo albums. I was looking for something, anything, that explained the trust. Around dawn, my phone rang. It wasn't my parents'. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Joyce Sterling?" An older woman's voice asked. It sounded raspy, like someone who smoked too much. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Margaret Vance. You probably don't know my name." "I don't," I said, my hand hovering over the end call button. "I was Richard's first wife," she said. I froze. My father had never mentioned a first wife. "I heard about Tiffany," Margaret said. "News travels fast in small circles, and I know they are trying to cut you open." "How do you know that?" "Because Eleanor called me," Margaret laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "She wanted to know if I still had any of her old medical files, to forge a history." "Whose files?" "Your mother's, your real mother's." The room spun. I sat down heavily on the floor, amidst the scattered photos of a childhood that suddenly felt like a stage set. "What are you talking about? Eleanor is my mother." "Oh, honey," Margaret sighed. "Eleanor couldn't have children. She's barren." Richard left me for her because she promised him wealth, connections, but she couldn't give him an heir. So they adopted. They adopted you first. I'm adopted? The words felt foreign on my tongue. Yes, but not just from an agency. You were a private placement. Your biological mother was a woman named Evelyn St. James. She was wealthy, very wealthy. She died in childbirth. You were her only heir. I stared at the wall. Evelyn St. James. I knew that name. It was on the building of the library I studied in during college. It was a name associated with old money, oil money. They took you in, Margaret continued, because Richard was named the executor of Evelyn's estate until you turned 25. They lived off your money, Joyce. The struggling years? That was them blowing through the liquid assets. But I'm 32, I whispered. Why didn't I get the money at 25? Because they claimed you were mentally incompetent to manage it, Margaret said. Or maybe they forged your signature to extend the trusteeship. I don't know the details. But then they adopted Tiffany. Is Tiffany adopted too? Yes, but she was a ward of the state. She was a prop. They needed a second child to claim more caregiver allowances from the estate. But here's the kicker, Joyce. Tiffany isn't the key to the trust. You are. If you die, or if you are incapacitated, the trust doesn't dissolve. It goes to the guardians. Them. My blood ran cold. But Dad said, on the recording. He said if Tiffany dies, the trust dissolves. He was lying to Eleanor, Margaret said. Or Eleanor is lying to him, or they are confused. But I know Evelyn's will. I saw it 20 years ago. The money follows you, unless you donate it or sign it away. The consent forms, I realized. The stack of papers Eleanor tried to make me sign. It wasn't just medical consent. Bingo, Margaret said. You need to find those papers, Joyce, and you need to stay alive. My apartment felt like a crime scene. The boxes of photos, me smiling on a pony, me at graduation, me with the parents who I thought loved me, now looked like evidence of a 20-year abduction. I had to act fast. I called Marcus back. Marcus Vance just blew the case wide open. I need you to pull the probate records for Evelyn St. James. Now. Then I got dressed. I put on my sharpest blazer, my highest heels. I applied red lipstick, my war paint. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to the hospital. I walked into St. Jude's at 9 a.m. My parents were in the cafeteria, looking disheveled and frantic. When they saw me, Eleanor practically leaped over the table. Joyce, oh thank God! She tried to hug me. I sidestepped her. She hugged the air, stumbling slightly. I'm here, I said, my voice calm, professional. I needed to clear my head. It's a big decision. Of course, Dad said, wiping egg yolk from his lip. But we're out of time, honey. Tiffany is fading. I'm ready to sign, I lied, but I need to see the paperwork again. All of it. I want to read what I'm signing. I'm an auditor, Mom. You know I don't sign anything blindly. Eleanor's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled, a tight, predatory smile. That's my smart girl. Dr. Evans has the file in the room. We went up to room 402. Tiffany was awake, looking yellow and bloated, hooked up to a forest of tubes. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She rolled her eyes. Finally, she rasped. Took you long enough. I'm dying here. Hello to you too, Tiffany, I said dryly. Dr. Evans was there, holding the thick clipboard. He thrust it at me. Standard waivers, anesthesia consent, liability release. I took the clipboard and sat down. I began to read. Really read. Page 1, medical consent. Page 2, liability waiver. Page 3, anesthesia. Power of attorney. I paused. My finger hovered over the clause, hidden in a dense paragraph about medical decision-making during incapacitation. It granted Eleanor Sterling full, durable power of attorney over my finances and assets in perpetuity in the event of any surgical complication. And tucked behind that, a transfer of assets form. It looked like a standard hospital billing guarantee, but the language was tricky. It authorized the transfer of the St. James Trust holdings to a joint account managed by Eleanor and Richard Sterling to cover medical expenses. My hand shook, but I controlled it. They had buried a multi-million-dollar theft inside a liver transplant consent form. "This is a lot of legal jargon," I said, flipping the page casually. "I need time to read this thoroughly." "We don't have time," Eleanor snapped. "Just sign it, Joyce. Do you want your sister to die?" "I want to make sure I don't wake up bankrupt," I said, looking her dead in the eye. Just then, my phone buzzed. A secure email from Dr. Sarah Chen. Subject: Urgent Results. I opened it under the table. Patient: Joyce Sterling, Tiffany Sterling. HLA match 0/6. No match. Blood type: Joyce, A+, Tiffany, B-. Incompatible. DNA relationship: 0.0% shared. Not related. I scrolled down. There was a note from Dr. Chen. Warning: transplanting an A+ liver into a B- recipient will cause hyperacute rejection. The organ will fail immediately. The patient will likely die on the table. This surgery is not a cure. It is a murder-suicide. I felt bile rise in my throat. They weren't trying to save Tiffany. They knew it wouldn't work. Or maybe they were too stupid to know. No, Dr. Evans knew. If I signed those papers and went into surgery, 1. They get power of attorney over the trust. 2. I lose half my liver. 3. Tiffany rejects the organ and dies, solving their burden problem. 4. Or I die from complications, solving their witness problem. It was a slaughterhouse. "Joyce?" Dad prompted, sweating. I stood up. I didn't sign. I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photos of the power of attorney and the asset transfer forms. "What are you doing?" Eleanor demanded. "Sending this to my lawyer," I said. "Standard procedure." Eleanor lunged for the phone. "Give me that." I pulled back. "Don't touch me." "You ungrateful little brat," Eleanor screamed. "After everything we did for you, we saved you from the gutter. Your mother was a whore who died owing everyone money." "Really?" I asked, my voice icy. "Because I'm looking at a transfer of assets form here referencing the St. James Trust. If she was broke, what's in the trust, Mom?" Eleanor went pale. Silence slammed into the room. Even Tiffany stopped moaning to listen. "I need to go to the bathroom." "You're not going anywhere." Eleanor blocked the door. "Let her go, Elle," Dad said, his voice trembling. She just needs a minute." I pushed past my mother. I walked out of the room, down the hall, and straight into the waiting elevator. As the doors closed, I sent the photos to Marcus and my new lawyer, Stone. I had the receipts. Now I was going to burn their house down. I didn't leave the hospital this time. I went to the cafeteria, bought a black coffee, and set up a command center at a corner table. I was done running. Marcus texted, "Probate records confirmed. Evelyn St. James left you $5.2 million in 1995. The trust matures when you turn 25 or if you marry. Trustees, Eleanor and Richard, have been drawing a management fee of $15,000 a month for 30 years, but the principal is missing." Missing. That meant they stole it, embezzled it. I texted back. They tried to get me to sign a power of attorney buried in the medical forms. They want to cover the theft before the audit hits. I realized their timeline. I had recently been promoted at work. My background check for the new clearance level would likely flag the trust. They knew the gig was up. They needed me incapacitated or dead so they could retain control before the bank contacted me directly. My phone rang. It was Eleanor. I let it go to voicemail. Then, a text from Tiffany. Mom is freaking out. She says you're having a mental breakdown. She's calling the cops. I stared at the screen. Calling the cops? On me? I called Lawyer Stone. He was a shark Marcus recommended. Expensive, aggressive, and specialized in high-conflict inheritance. Mr. Stone, this is Joyce Sterling, I said. They are threatening to call the police. Let them, Stone grumbled. His voice sounded like gravel in a mixer. You are a competent adult. You have the right to refuse a medical procedure. If they try to force you, it's assault. But Joyce, we need to strike first. I'm filing an emergency injunction to freeze the trust assets, and I'm filing a report with the medical board about Dr. Evans. They are going to say I'm crazy, I said. That's their next move. Eleanor has been planting seeds for years that I'm high-strung or overworked. Then we need proof of sanity, Stone said. Stay in public, don't yell, don't scream. Be the calmest person in the room. I'm on my way to the hospital. I sat there, sipping my coffee. 10 minutes later, 2 security guards approached my table. Behind them was Eleanor, looking like a tragic, weeping mother. There she is, Eleanor sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's having a psychotic break. She thinks we're trying to kill her. Please, you have to help her. She's a danger to herself. The guard, a burly man named Dave, looked at me. Ma'am, your mother is concerned. I set my coffee down. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I looked Dave in the eye. Officer, my name is Joyce Sterling. I am a certified public accountant. I am currently reviewing a legal document my mother tried to force me to sign, which grants her access to a multi-million-dollar trust fund she concealed from me for 30 years. I paused. Dave blinked. Eleanor gasped. I am not having a breakdown, I continued smoothly. I am refusing to donate an organ to a patient with whom I have 0 genetic compatibility, as proven by this lab report from Dr. Sarah Chen. I slid the email across the table. Dave looked at the phone. He looked at Eleanor. She's lying, Eleanor shrieked. She forged that. She's delusional. Ma'am, please lower your voice, Dave said to Eleanor. Check the blood types, I said to Dave. It's basic biology. I'm A positive. My sister is B negative. Dr. Evans knows this. Ask him why he scheduled a transplant that would kill the patient. Eleanor lunged at me. She actually lunged. Her hands were claws, reaching for my face. You ungrateful bitch! I will ruin you! Dave intercepted her, holding her back. Ma'am, step back. She's sick. Eleanor screamed, struggling against the guard. She needs to be committed. I am her guardian. Actually, I said, standing up now, smoothing my blazer, you're not. I'm 32, and as of this morning, my lawyer is filing for a restraining order. People in the cafeteria were filming with their phones. Good, let them film. I wanted witnesses. Richard, Eleanor yelled at my father, who was cowering near the entrance. Do something. Dad just looked at me. There was fear in his eyes, yes, but also resignation. He knew I had the numbers, and he knew that unlike him, I knew how to use them. We're leaving, Eleanor spat, straightening her dress as Dave released her. But this isn't over, Joyce. You think you can fight me? I made you. I can destroy you. You didn't make me, I said quietly, so only she could hear. You just stole me. She froze. The color drained from her face completely. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking aggressively, but the rhythm was off. She was stumbling. I sat back down. My hands were trembling under the table, but I felt a strange surge of power. The mouse had just bitten back. I thought the cafeteria confrontation was the climax. I was wrong. It was just the opening shot. By that afternoon, I was served with papers. Not at the hospital, but at my office. They had moved fast. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a client's audit, when the receptionist called. "Joyce, there is a process server here for you." I walked to the lobby. A man handed me a thick envelope. "Joyce Sterling, you've been served." I opened it. It was an emergency petition for temporary medical guardianship. Eleanor had found a judge, probably an old friend or someone she bribed, to sign an emergency order claiming I was suffering from acute paranoid delusions and was a danger to my dying sister. The petition claimed I had promised to donate, then reneged due to mental instability, putting a life at risk. It demanded I appear in family court the next morning at 9 a.m. If the judge ruled in their favor, Eleanor would have the legal right to make medical decisions for me. She could force me onto that operating table. I called Stone. "This is insane," I shouted, pacing my office. "How can a judge sign this without even seeing me?" "It's an ex-parte hearing," Stone explained calmly. "One side tells a scary story. The judge grants a temporary hold until a full hearing. It happens. Eleanor is playing the grieving mother card perfectly." "So what do we do?" "We go to court," Stone said, "and we bring the nuclear option. Did you get the bank records yet?" "Marcus is emailing them now." I checked my inbox. Marcus had come through. The file was titled The Smoking Gun. I opened the PDF. It was a history of the St. James Trust. Starting balance in 1995, $5.2 million. Current balance, $4,300. I scrolled through the transaction history. Porsche dealership, $80,000. Tiffany's modeling school, $25,000. Vacation, Maldives, $40,000. Cash withdrawal, $10,000 monthly. Page after page of my birthright, my mother's legacy, being eaten alive by the people who claimed to be saving me. They had spent my mother's life savings on Tiffany's failed whims and their own vanity. And the worst part? The transactions from the last 6 months. Dr. Evans Consulting, $50,000. Dr. Evans Consulting, $50,000. They were paying the doctor from my money to kill me. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It wasn't hot like anger. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of feeling you get when you look at a math problem and finally see the solution. I printed 3 copies of everything. I bound them in binders. I labeled them Exhibit A. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a hotel under a fake name. I knew Eleanor. She would try to ambush me. She would try to stage an intervention to make me look crazy before court. I turned on the TV in the hotel room. The local news was on. Breaking news. A local family pleads for help. A dying young woman needs a liver, and her sister, the only match, has vanished. There was Eleanor, on TV, crying into a handkerchief. "We just want Joyce to come home. She's confused. She's not herself. Tiffany only has days left." They showed a picture of me, an unflattering one where I looked angry, next to a picture of Tiffany looking like an angel in a hospital bed. The text on the screen read, "Sister refuses to save sister." They were trying to try me in the court of public opinion. They wanted to shame me into submission. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV. I looked at the binders of evidence. "Cry all you want, Eleanor," I whispered to the dark room. "Tomorrow, you're not the grieving mother. Tomorrow, you're the defendant." The courthouse was swarming with reporters. Eleanor had clearly tipped him off. As I walked up the steps with Mr. Stone, cameras flashed in my face. "Joyce, is it true you're letting your sister die? Joyce, why do you hate your family? Joyce, are you suffering from a breakdown? I kept my head up, wearing large sunglasses and my best auditor suit, navy blue, sharp lines. I didn't say a word. Mr. Stone plowed a path for us. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was theatrical. Eleanor sat on the plaintiff's side, dressed in modest black, clutching a rosary. Dad was next to her, looking like he wanted to vomit. Tiffany wasn't there. She was too weak, but they had placed a large framed photo of her on the table. It was grotesque. Judge Miller entered. He was an older man, stern-faced. He looked at me with open disapproval. Eleanor's narrative had clearly worked on him. "We are here on the matter of the guardianship of Joyce Sterling," the judge said. "Mrs. Sterling, you claim your daughter is mentally incapacitated?" Eleanor stood up, her voice trembling perfectly. "Yes, Your Honor, Joyce has always been troubled, but since Tiffany got sick, she snapped. She believes in conspiracies. She thinks we're stealing from her. She ran away from the hospital right before a life-saving surgery. We just want the legal authority to get her the help she needs and to save our other daughter." She dabbed her eyes. "I love her, Your Honor. I just want to save both my girls." It was an Oscar-worthy performance. The judge turned to me. "Miss Sterling, you refused a transplant procedure." Mr. Stone stood up. "Your Honor, my client did not refuse a procedure. She refused to be murdered." Gasps in the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. "Counsel, watch your language." "I am choosing my words carefully, Your Honor," Stone said. "We have evidence that the petitioners are not acting in the interest of the patient, but in the interest of covering up grand larceny and fraud." Eleanor jumped up. "Objection! He's lying. This is her delusion talking." "Sit down, Mrs. Purchin." "Sterling," the judge barked. He turned to Stone. "Make your case, but make it fast. A girl is dying." Stone nodded to me. I stood up. I walked to the witness stand. I placed my binder on the ledge. "Miss Sterling," Stone asked, "why did you leave the hospital?" "Because I discovered that Dr. Evans had falsified my medical records," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "He claimed I was a match for my sister. I am not." I opened the binder. Exhibit A, independent DNA and blood analysis from Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief of Pathology at Mercy General. It shows I am A positive. Tiffany is B negative. A transplant would be fatal. The judge frowned. "Bailiff, bring that here." Eleanor's face twitched. "Furthermore," I continued, "the report indicates zero genetic relationship between myself and the petitioners." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. "And finally," I said, pulling out the bank records, "I discovered why they were so desperate to force this surgery. Exhibit B, the ledger of the St. James Trust, a trust fund left to me by my biological mother, Evelyn St. James, $5 million. I looked directly at Eleanor. She had stopped crying. She was staring at me with pure hatred. "The petitioners have drained this account to near zero," I said. "They forged my signature on trusteeship extensions, and the medical power of attorney they tried to make me sign 2 days ago included a clause to transfer the remaining assets to them." The judge was flipping through the pages rapidly now. His disapproval was shifting. He looked from the bank statements to Eleanor. "Mrs. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "is this true? Is this your daughter's trust fund?" It was for the family," Eleanor stammered, abandoning the crazy daughter script. "We raised her. We deserve that money. She's ungrateful." "So you admit the money existed?" Stone interjected. "We needed it," Eleanor screamed, losing control. "Tiffany is sick. She needs special care. Joyce has a job. She doesn't need it." Your Honor, Stone said, we move to dismiss the guardianship petition, and we would like to submit these documents to the district attorney's office immediately. The judge looked at me. For the first time, I saw respect in his eyes. Petition dismissed with prejudice, the judge ruled. And Mrs. Sterling, I suggest you get a criminal defense lawyer. Bailiff, secure the doors. I'm holding the petitioners in contempt until the police arrive. The gavel banged. Eleanor screamed, a real scream this time, not a fake one. Dad put his head in his hands. But I didn't smile, because this wasn't the end. This was just the legal battle. The real battle, the public one, the one to clear my name and expose the truth about Tiffany's heroic battle, was just beginning. I turned to the reporters in the back, who were frantically typing on their phones. You wanted a story? I said to them. I'll give you a story. Meet me at the hospital press room in 1 hour. I'm going to show you exactly what family values look like. The drive from the courthouse to St. Jude's Hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My phone was vibrating nonstop. The story had broken. The headline, Daughter Sues Parents Over Organ Theft, was trending locally. But I knew the news cycle was fickle. If I didn't nail the coffin shut right now, Eleanor would find a way to spin this. She would go on talk shows. She would cry about her mental daughter. I couldn't give her that chance. I met Marcus and Lawyer Stone in the hospital lobby. Stone looked grimly satisfied. The hospital board is panicking, Stone said, checking his watch. They agreed to let us use the media room because they want to distance themselves from Evans. They know a lawsuit is coming, and they want to look like they're cooperating. Good, I said, adjusting my blazer. Is Evans there? He's trying to leave, Marcus grinned, holding up his phone showing a live feed from the parking lot security cam he'd hacked into. But I had a buddy in security boot his Mercedes. He's stuck. We walked into the media room. It was packed. Reporters who had been at the courthouse had beaten us there. Cameras were set up. Microphones were clustered on the podium like a bouquet of robotic flowers. I walked to the podium. I didn't look nervous. I looked like a CEO announcing a hostile takeover. Ladies and gentlemen, I started, my voice steady. Thank you for coming. You've heard the rumors. You've seen the court filings. Now I'm going to show you the truth. I signaled to Marcus. He connected his laptop to the projector. A massive image appeared on the screen behind me. It was a side-by-side comparison of 2 blood vials, one labeled Joyce, A+, one labeled Tiffany, B-. This is basic biology, I said, pointing to the screen. Dr. Evans, a man employed by this hospital, scheduled a liver transplant between an A-positive donor and a B-negative recipient. Any first-year medical student knows this leads to hyperacute rejection. The organ dies, the patient dies. The room erupted in flashes. Reporters were shouting questions. Why would he do that? A reporter from Channel 5 yelled. Because he wasn't paid to save a life, I said, cutting through the noise. He was paid to process a transaction. Marcus clicked the next slide. It was a blow-up of the bank transfer. Dr. Evans Consulting, $50,000. My parents paid Dr. Evans $100,000 from a trust fund they embezzled from me, I explained. They needed me on that operating table, not to save my sister, but to incapacitate me. Buried in the surgical consent forms was a power of attorney clause that would have given them total control over the remaining assets of the St. James estate. I paused, letting the silence endure. They weren't harvesting a liver, I said, looking directly into the camera lens. They were harvesting a signature. Suddenly, the side door banged open. It was Dr. Evans. He looked disheveled, sweating profusely, his white coat stained with coffee. He was trying to push past a security guard to get to the exit. That's a lie, Evan screamed, his voice cracking. She's lying. It was a clerical error. The blood types were a clerical error. A clerical error? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Is the DNA test a clerical error too? Marcus flashed the next slide. 0.0% genetic match. You certified me as a genetic match for a sister I'm not related to, I said. You fabricated a medical history to justify a dangerous, unnecessary surgery on a healthy woman. That's not an error, doctor. That's malpractice. That's fraud. That's attempted manslaughter. The reporters swiveled their cameras toward Evans. He looked like a deer in headlights. He started backing away, but he bumped right into the hospital administrator, Dr. Mueller. Richardson, who had just walked in with 2 uniformed police officers. Dr. Evans, Richardson said, his voice cold as ice. We need to have a talk, and these officers have a warrant for your files. I was following orders, Evans blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at the camera. Eleanor Sterling told me to do it. She said the girl was just an insurance policy. She said it didn't matter what happened to her. The room gasped. He had said it. He had said the words out loud. Insurance policy. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I didn't need to say another word. The villain had just confessed. Does anyone else have questions? I asked the room. What about your sister? A reporter asked. Is she really dying? My sister is sick, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. But not from a genetic disease. She has alcoholic liver disease. She needs rehab and a place on the national transplant list like everyone else. She doesn't need my liver. She needs to face reality. And frankly, so do my parents. I stepped down from the podium. As I walked out, the flashbulbs were blinding, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like hiding. I felt like I was walking into the light. The police didn't wait. After Dr. Evans implicated Eleanor on live TV, the district attorney fast-tracked the arrest warrants. I went up to room 402 with Sheriff Miller. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. I needed to witness the moment their delusion finally shattered against the hard wall of the law. When we walked in, the room was quiet. The TV was off. Eleanor was packing a bag, frantically throwing designer clothes into a suitcase. Dad was sitting in the chair by the window, staring blankly at the parking lot. Tiffany was asleep, or pretending to be. Eleanor and Richard Sterling, Sheriff Miller announced, stepping into the room. Eleanor spun around. Her face was a mask of smeared mascara and terror. You can't come in here. This is a private room. You're under arrest, Miller said, pulling out his handcuffs, for grand larceny, fraud, conspiracy to commit bodily harm, and forgery. No, Eleanor shrieked as the deputy grabbed her wrists. You can't do this. I am a mother. My daughter is dying. Save it for the judge, Miller said, clicking the cuffs tight. Dad didn't fight. He stood up slowly, extending his hands like a man who had been expecting this for 20 years. I told you, Elle, he muttered. I told you Joyce was too smart. Shut up, Richard, Eleanor spat. Then she saw me standing in the doorway. Her eyes went wide. She lunged toward me, but the deputy held her back. You did this, you ungrateful snake. We fed you. We clothed you. You owe us. I don't owe you a thing, I said calmly. I paid for the clothes. I paid for the food. I paid for this hospital room. And you stole $5 million from me. The debt is settled, Eleanor. Tiffany stirred in the bed. She opened her eyes, groggy and confused. She saw Mom in handcuffs. She saw the police. Mom, Tiffany whined. What's happening? Who's going to get my juice? Your sister put us in jail, Eleanor screamed. She's killing us, Tiffany. She's killing all of us. Tiffany looked at me. There was no realization in her eyes, no apology, just pure, unadulterated selfishness. "Joyce, stop this," Tiffany said, sounding annoyed. "I need Mom here. I have a treatment in an hour. Tell them to let her go. This is so embarrassing for me." I looked at Tiffany, the girl I had protected, the girl I had tried to save. I realized then that she was just as much a monster as they were. She was a product of their entitlement, twisted and hardened into a permanent state of need. "I can't help you, Tiff," I said. "Mom and Dad are going away for a long time. And since the trust is frozen and the bank accounts are being seized, you're going to be transferred." "Transferred?" Tiffany sat up. "Transferred where?" "To the county hospital," I said. "St. Jude's is a private facility. You can't pay the bill anymore, and neither can I." "You can't do that," Tiffany screamed, her face turning red. "It smells there. The nurses are mean. Mom, do something." "I'm sorry, baby," Eleanor wailed as she was dragged out the door. "Joyce, please, don't let them take her to county." I watched them go. The screaming faded down the hallway. I turned to Sheriff Miller. "Thank you." "Just doing my job, Miss Sterling," he said, tipping his hat. "You want to ride down to the station to give your statement?" "I'll meet you there," I said. "I have one more thing to do here." I walked over to Tiffany's bed. She was crying now, but it was the angry crying of a toddler denied a toy. "You have to pay for this room, Joyce," she demanded. "You have money. You have that trust fund." "That money isn't for you," I said softly. "That money was left by my mother, my real mother, to secure my future, not to fund your addiction." "I'm sick," she yelled. "You are," I agreed, "and County has a very strict detox program. It's exactly what you need. If you survive the detox, and if you stay sober for 6 months, maybe you'll get on the transplant list, but that's up to you now." "I hate you," she hissed. "I wish you had never been adopted." "Me too, Tiffany," I said. "Me too." I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I heard her screaming my name, screaming for a nurse, screaming for vodka. But for the first time in my life, her voice didn't make me stop. It was just noise. Background noise in a life that was finally, quietly mine. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but when they grind everything to dust. It took 6 months for the trial to conclude. I sat in the front row every day, documenting every lie, every contradiction. Eleanor tried to plead insanity, claiming the stress of Tiffany's illness made her act irrationally. But the paper trail, the 30 years of calculated embezzlement, proved otherwise. You don't accidentally set up shell companies in the Caymans because you're stressed. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty, on all counts. The judge, the same Judge Miller who had dismissed the guardianship petition, didn't hold back during sentencing. "Eleanor and Richard Sterling," he said, peering over his glasses, "you took a child into your home not to love her, but to harvest her assets. You treated her as livestock. Your greed is matched only by your cruelty. I sentence you both to 15 years in federal prison." 15 years. They would be in their 80s when they got out. If they got out. Dr. Evans took a plea deal. He gave up the entire network of corrupt medical practices he was involved in. He got 5 years, and his medical license was permanently revoked. But the most satisfying part wasn't the prison sentences. It was the asset recovery. I worked with Lawyer Stone and a team of forensic accountants to dismantle my parents' life. We sold the house, the big Victorian mansion they had bought with my mother's money. We sold the luxury cars. We auctioned off Eleanor's jewelry, her furs, her art collection. Every dollar recovered went back into the St. James Trust. I remember standing on the lawn of the house the day of the auction, Watching strangers bid on the dining room table where I had been told I was worthless. Watching them carry out the chase lounge where Tiffany had spent her days drinking. It felt like an exorcism. Speaking of Tiffany, the reality check hit her harder than the disease. She was transferred to the county facility. Without the private room and the constant enabling, she had to face her addiction head-on. It wasn't pretty. I visited her once, about 3 months in. She looked terrible, thin, pale, shaking, but she was sober. "They make me make my own bed here," she muttered, not looking at me. "Good," I said. "Are you going to get me out?" she asked. It was a weak attempt at manipulation. "No," I said. "I'm paying for your rehab program. That's it. No cash, no apartment, no car. If you want a life, Tiffany, you have to build it yourself, just like I did." She didn't say thank you. She just turned over and faced the wall. I left her there. I knew she might hate me forever, but at least she was alive. I had saved her life, just not the way she wanted. The hardest part of the aftermath was the quiet. For years, my life had been defined by their crises. Mom needs money. Dad needs a bailout. Tiffany is in trouble. Without the chaos, I felt a strange void. I had to relearn who I was. I wasn't Joyce the ATM. I wasn't Joyce the insurance policy. I was Joyce St. James. Yes, I changed my name. I legally dropped Sterling. I took my biological mother's last name. It felt like putting on a coat that actually fit after wearing hand-me-downs that were too tight for 30 years. I also quit my job. Not forever, but for a while. I had millions of dollars in the recovered trust. For the first time, I didn't have to work to survive. I could work for passion. I started going through the boxes Margaret Vance had given me, the real history of Evelyn St. James. I found letters she had written to me before I was born, diaries, photos of a woman who looked just like me, holding her belly, smiling with a warmth I had never seen on Eleanor's face. "My dearest baby," one letter read, "you are already so loved. I am building a world for you." She had built a world for me, and thieves had tried to steal it, but they failed because she had given me something they couldn't steal, her resilience, her blood. I sat on the floor of my new apartment, a penthouse downtown, far away from the suburbs, and wept. Not tears of pain, but tears of homecoming. I was finally meeting my mother. A year later. The sun was shining on the small cemetery overlooking the ocean. It was a private plot, overgrown with wildflowers. I knelt down and placed a bouquet of white lilies on the stone. "Beloved Mother." "Hi, Mom," I whispered. "I'm back." I wasn't alone. Standing a few feet away was Marcus. We had started dating shortly after the trial. It turned out that trauma bonding could actually turn into something healthy if you both went to therapy. And we did. Lots of therapy. "The foundation is officially open," I told the gravestone. I had used a significant portion of the recovered funds to start the St. James Initiative. We provided legal and financial aid to victims of financial abuse and coercion, specifically focusing on adoptees and foster children who were being exploited by their guardians. It was the work I was born to do. I used my accounting skills to track down stolen inheritances, and my story to give victims the courage to speak up. "We have our first case," I said, tracing the letters on the stone. "A boy in Ohio. His foster parents are using his disability checks to buy timeshares. We're going to crush them." I felt a light breeze brush against my cheek. It felt like approval. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the rehab center. "Update on patient Tiffany Sterling. Discharged. Sobriety maintained for 9 months. Employment secured at a local library." I smiled. A library. It was a small gob, minimum wage, but it was honest. Tiffany was shelving books, She was standing on her own 2 feet. Maybe, just maybe, the cycle was broken. I stood up and brushed the grass off my knees. Marcus walked over and took my hand. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." We walked back to the car. I looked at the ocean, vast and open. I thought about the girl who stood in the hospital parking lot a year ago, terrified and alone, thinking she was nothing more than spare parts. I wished I could go back and hug her. I wished I could tell her, "Just wait. You are about to burn their kingdom to the ground." But I didn't need to go back, because that girl was me, and she had survived. I got into the car, and for the first time in my life, I didn't check my rearview mirror to see if my parents were following me. I just looked forward. The road ahead was clear. The debts were paid, and the receipts, I had framed them. Thank you so much for listening to my story.